my spiritual journey, which took more shape in Mexico when I was 23, and I was really based on that reconnection for mothers. And I think through that reconnection, I would say to Mother Earth, it was a way to reconnect with myself and to heal myself. So I think, that environmental crisis, the climate crisis, is also an opportunity to become aware of how much we have been disconnected from the earth and from ourselves, and how much this is unhealthy, and this is a symptom of a deep spiritual crisis that affect actually our own well-being very much. And I think the new paradigm that I've put forward in politics of being in relation to nature, I think, is the rights of nature that we're seeing developing in many countries. And these are based on the understanding that nature is not an object. Nature is a living being. There is a universal declaration of the rights of Mother Earth, which say that the Earth actually is a living being. And we need to reconnect with that inside of Mother Earth, of Gaia, that you find in all indigenous traditions, I would say. And this is, and we are part of it, and we can connect to Mother Earth as a living being. We can have a proper relationship to that being, and we can feel the love of that being who is nourishing us, sustaining us, and supporting us in that journey of humanity.
Welcome to a Broaderlands podcast. The opinions expressed on Broaderlands podcasts are those of the guest speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of the host or Broaderlands podcast. Thomas, welcome to Broaderlands podcast. What an honor to have you on.
Thank you, Boo Boo. Likewise, so pleased to have this time with you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Maybe you can introduce yourself, since I always tend to screw that up. I'll let you introduce yourself, share a little bit about your background.
Sure. So I think my story started, let's say, with an encounter with native spirituality in Mexico, which really changed my life, led me to prioritize my spiritual path and be of service, in particular to Mother Earth. So I've worked a lot. Then I did. I was born in France. That was an encounter in Mexico. I then worked a lot in the field of environmental conservation, especially forest conservation. And but I was always, understanding the times we are undergoing as calling for a spiritual evolution, and where I think is the answer to many of the problems we're dealing with. And I've worked for 10 years. Because of that, I've worked for 10 years on writing a book called Politics of Being, Wisdom and Science for a New Development Paradigm, which has received international award, the Nautilus Book Grand Prize last year, and get, I think, great recognition. My spiritual journey has gone forward, and I've left during all that time for the last 10 years near Plum Village, the monastery of Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh. And I would say my work is now also fully aligned with that vision of the way forward. I'm working with the UN, with United Nations Development Program, on an initiative called the Conscious Food Systems Alliance, which is all about the role of inner development for the transformation of food systems.
Well, thank you. How did you come up with the name, the title, Politics of Being? What's the meaning behind that, and how is that different from politics we see today?
Sure. So I would say it's about, the subtitle say it's about a new development paradigm. And we could say that the current development paradigm is more or less around economic growth. So that's and I was looking for a wisdom-based approach to development. And I found in the Earth Charter that sentence
Mm,
which says when basic needs have been met, human development is primarily about being more rather than having more. So politics of being mean organizing societies for being more and not for having more.
mm, I love that. Would you say that part of our global crisis stems from not integrating spiritual principles? And is that even possible in a world where corporate elites hold so much influence and where many Christian Americans, for an example, in America, seem firmly rooted in their own belief system? So if you challenge with any type of spirituality, it's hard to apply.
Sure. So, in the history of the Western world, mainly modernity
Mm,
emerged as in opposition to religions and religious conflicts, right? So, we try to take this out of the public discussion and thinking that science somehow would be able to resolve our question, and thinking that by focusing, on material production, that we should be able to let go of any discussions, questions around our values, I would say, no, because, and I think that's a mistake. I mean, I don't, or secular modern societies wants to see themselves as value free, but they are not. Actually, the commercial values, for example, are, rather dominating. We don't necessarily recognize them. So we like to, see ourselves as secular, but and get rid of all the more philosophical value underpinnings. But I think this is just not possible, and we have to reintroduce it in a wise way, not in the older ways with, dogmatic religious teachings. But science cannot tell us what is the goal of our lives, of our societies, around what kind of values we should organize society. So we need to reintroduce that anyway. Otherwise, by default, they are set in the values of commercialism, let's say, which are not helpful and are leading us to the wall, to hit the wall, right? And so the wise way to me is integrating science and spirituality. And my approach to spirituality draws a lot on what we can call inter-spirituality. Basically, the main insights of all the wisdom tradition, which seems to converge around some of the highest human values. And in my book, I have some chapters on 7 of them showing that they are the core of wisdom traditions, but now they are also a field of scientific research. And they can tell us how to cultivate at the individual level and at the collective level these values. And I can mention some of them if you like.
Yeah, I would love for you to mention them. Thank you.
Yeah. So sure, and that's a part of the book where I call spiritual values as the foundation of the politics of being. And I think we see them in all the efforts we see for building more wiser, more conscious societies. So the first one, I call it understanding, but it relates to systemic thinking and complex thinking and how we can integrate that, for example, into education. The second one is about the value of life. And the regeneration movement, for example, is advocating to harmonize the principles of our societies, the way it's organized, with the way nature works. Happiness, we have, gross national happiness in Bhutan.
Mm,
We have countries that have committed to well-being economies. The value also of love. We have science of compassion, empathy. We have many cities over the world have committed to becoming compassionate cities, for example. The value of peace. The UN has been really supporting of building culture of peace, and I think it's really very needed. And we have peace
mm,
studies that can tell us how to do that. Mindfulness, for example, a lot of science showing the potential of mindfulness, and some countries have been looking at integrating that in public policies, like the UK, in different fields, education, health, justice, etc. So just to give some examples to show that there is, I think I built a method and a very practical ways to organize societies according to spiritual values, which is something that have been, we could say, prophesied by many traditions, that the world will really find its own harmony once we or societies live according to spiritual values and principles. So there is a very practical way to design and implement that, as I show in this book.
I always say science without spirituality is incomplete, and spirituality without science is ignorance. And you kind of bridge the gap and you blend all into your book. So thank you. Thank you for your work.
Exactly. Thank you.
How do you personally define spirituality, especially in the context of governance and a collective well being?
Yeah, thank you. Very good question. I mean, especially I like you say in the context, because it's because of that purpose of I'm setting up that agenda about organizing societies for being. What does that mean? How do I define that? And my definition of being actually meets the definition I use for spirituality. Somehow, I mean, the spirituality beyond being the science and art of personal evolution or of being. And I define being as just very simply becoming basically our best and truest and highest self. So on one way, it's about becoming who I am. And on the other way, as I'm connecting with my true being, I tend to naturally express the highest human qualities and values.
How do you define the difference between religion and spirituality?
So yeah, I think the religion. I mean, there's the light. I would say that as from around which religions have emerged is that kind of spiritual light. But then religions are institutions, human organizations that can choose to pursue their own power and are not free of any of these problems with any human organization. So I really make that big differences, but acknowledging also the link between them.
And in your book, you clearly show how science is telling us if we live more in a more mindful, more conscious way of living or spiritual basis, how our reality and our society will change?
Yes, definitely, and I explore that from these different ways. All of these values that I've mentioned
Mm-hmm.
and the science behind them is forging a new narrative. That I connect with what is often referred to, the change from narrative from separation to interbeing. They are telling us a new stories about our human potential, about how reality is, about how things work. And I'm exploring. I said, in this book to me is like a meditation to explore from many different perspectives how this inner dimension is really the key to deal with the current problems we are facing and evolve our societies. So I'm looking at it also from looking at, I have also 9 sectoral chapters looking at, family, education, governance, justice, nature, etc. Um, to really show what is this kind of new paradigm that have this wisdom or spiritual underpinning, and how it can inspire the solutions in all these different sectors. And I was surprised to see that actually they are being recognized by, I think, the best experts in all these different fields. They come out to the same conclusion that if you're starting to look from that kind of spiritual wisdom or inner understanding of how things work, you reach out the same conclusion.
Mm.
And I was surprised about that. And my understanding is that because we have been so far in the different direction, in the paradigm of separation, now all the solutions to this disbalance needs to address that inner dimension.
I love that. Say someone doesn't like the term spirituality, they don't believe in a religion, God, spirituality. How do you speak to them to hear the message?
Yeah, I talk more about wisdom, the inner dimension. I mean, in my work, we're the Conscious Food Systems Alliance, we're talking about consciousness, we're talking about mindset, values, worldviews, all these words that look more scientific. So
Mm.
really, it's about the inner dimension. We use also the concept of inner capacities and partnering, for example, with the inner development goals. We have come with this typology of 23 qualities and skills clustered in 5 categories: being, like presence, thinking, being able to take perspective, to have systemic thinking, to deal with complexity, relating, the how much we care and show compassion and empathy, collaborating, how much we're able to, yeah, connect with people, even people that are different from us, and work together, and acting. And there is, courage, perseverance, creativity, etc.
Yeah, thank you. You live by near Thich Nhat Hanh in Plum Village. I would love for you to touch on that a little bit. How was it living by Plum Village?
Well, I think that's one of the best decisions we took with my wife in our lives. We arrived there 10 years ago. My wife was pregnant. I feel it was kind of almost written, because the first day I met my wife in Costa Rica, and I told her I was coming from France. The first thing she said, that there was a place that she'd like to know in France, and that was Plum Village. So,
Wow.
and we ended up being there. I remember once we went for the first time, I remember feeling, yeah, something was waiting for us there. And actually, after 2 days being there, the first time we saw Thich Nhat Hanh, I felt, wow, there is really something going on here, and something I want to be part of. And 6 months later, we just moved there. So to me, it has been, for those that do not necessarily know the teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh, is often referred to as the father of mindfulness, and he has been emphasizing bringing mindfulness into all of our activities in daily life, not only sitting meditation, but also walking meditation, eating meditation, being able to maintain that presence even while talking and listening to people. And yeah, to me, I'm working, quite a lot. I'm engaged in the world, and being able to, I think what I've developed being there is to really arrive very quickly in the here and the now as soon as I step in the monastery. Sometimes, I have a busy day in calls, etc., and then I just go for a walk or for a mindful lunch in the Plum Village Monastery. It's always that, how can I completely fully step in that meditative energy in the moment. And in Thich Nhat Hanh practices, we are using the bell also for that. So every 15 minutes, there is a bell ringing in Plum Village, and it's just a signal for us to stop, to come back to our breathing, to relax our body, to smile, and come back to ourselves and the present moment.
Mhm.
So I think this is living nearby. I think this is that capacity of stopping is something that I've practiced very much. And I would say, yeah, I've written that book during the 10 years I've been living next to Plum Village. And of course, I've sit for a long time with all these ideas, listening to a lot of Dharma talks, and I think it has helped me a lot to really digest with meditation all these knowledge I've been and wisdom I've been working with. And yeah, Thich Nhat Hanh is also famous for engaged Buddhism, applied Buddhism. So it has been really a beautiful place to grow that reflection. Yeah.
Does that practice help you when it gets really rough out here and in here? When you get stressed, when you experience stress or something chaotic or anger, is it easier for you today by practicing mindfulness?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a training. So I think now I'm more and more able to cultivate that mindful energy, and being able to, yeah, when a strong emotion comes out, to be able to recognize it, to embrace it, and yeah, trying to not being acted by it. So yeah, definitely, it's something that I'm practicing on a daily basis too.
Mm.
Yeah.
He said something once. and I love it. It's walk as you're kissing the earth with your feet. Is that
Hmm.
mindfulness?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it has been very inspirational about bringing this practice of mindful walking, in particular outside of the Dharma hall of the monastery, to walk in nature in mindfulness. And there are really beautiful paths where we practice in Plum Village in this oak forest. And yeah, it's a practice I love. It's a practice of connecting very deeply with Mother Earth. We can also use some mantras.
Mm.
Sometimes they recommend one is breathing in, you're saying Mother Earth, and you're taking one step, Mother Earth, Mother Earth, breathing out, here for you, here for you, here for you. So yeah, there are different ways to practice that connection with Mother Earth when doing mindful walking.
I love that. Were you able to see the statue of Martin Luther King in Thich Nhat Hanh? I believe there's a
Where
statue. I believe there's a statue there in Plum Village of Martin Luther King.
I don't think so.
Hmm.
I've not seen it, but it's true that Martin Luther King and Thich Nhat Hanh were very close. Actually, Martin Luther King nominated him for the Nobel Peace Prize, and that was a year, and he shouldn't have expressed it publicly. And this year there was no Nobel Peace Prize given. And yeah, Thich Nhat Hanh has said that he has felt he was very moved by the death of Martin Luther King, and he has even said that he has felt his support and kind of continuing his work of building the beloved community. That's also something Thich Nhat Hanh has stressed a lot in his teaching, the importance of the community, the Sangha, and he even went to say that maybe the next Buddha would be a community. And his teachings are often referred to as kind of relational spirituality, how to live together in harmony and how to cultivate loving speech, deep listening. We have even methods for dealing with conflicts and cultivating healthy relationships. So it has been very much part of his teaching, this emphasis on the community.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. He was also good friends with Thomas Merton. And I was telling Marianne Williamson, he wrote The Living Buddha, Living Christ, but I think Thich Nhat Hanh became the living Buddha, became the living Christ in our time. And he's definitely a gift to humanity. I know we hear those names, Buddha or Christ, and they create images and, you know, what we think. But I think to keep it simple, Buddha and Christ were very similar to what Thich Nhat Hanh became, just understanding his oneness and more in harmony with me, you, and the world around us, our interconnectedness, our inner being, and really tapped into the heart. And that's what I loved about mystics because they go beyond their belief systems and they really tap into
Mhm.
that unity consciousness within their own heart.
Yeah, Neil, I think it gets back to the differences between spirituality and religion. I
Mm,
think none of the great prophets of the religion, or very few, thought they were, building a separate religion. Actually, especially in the regions of the book,
mm,
most of them thought of themselves as a continuation of the previous prophets, and they will really feel like brothers in the same work. So yeah, it's a pity that then religions develop, and they also want to maintain their power. And actually, one of the last prophet in that tradition of the book I mentioned in my book is Baha'u'llah from the Baha'i faith, and he brought that concept of progressive revelation to be able to show that actually the essence of all religions are the same, and but just there are different prophets coming in different times and in different places to support the evolution needed in these times and places. And I use that also for my recommendation on governance, because actually Baha'u'llah saw that the main hindrance for the next revelation was always about the clergy. So he designed a religion without a clergy and designed systems of governance that he said um, nations could even choose to adopt freely if they choose so in the future. And what I found is that these governance systems as striking similarities to an ideal governance system that best political scientists from the West and from Asia have worked on. They call intelligent governance, and
Mm.
they converge. These two group of researchers converge to same kind of ideal governance system, which actually are striking similarities with the Baha'i governance systems. So that's just a nice example about how wisdom and science can actually come together, validate each other, and the importance of that traditions also have specific insights that they can offer to the world that can be useful for our societies.
Yeah, thank you. Because every religion shares the same spiritual principles. It's only the belief systems that create that egoic division in many ways if you don't really apply principles and tap into the heart.
Definitely, and we often say, I mean, as you say, and I think there is a common mystic experience at the roots of all religions, which is you can use different words. You use unity consciousness, I think, can be oneness. You can call it oneness or interbeing, as Thich Nhat Hanh would say.
Mm,
But it's the same experience,
yeah.
but then it's understood in different terms by different traditions. But yeah, they do share the same. And actually, what's interesting in interspirituality, and that's also been my experience, is that by studying, I would say, I don't know, the word that came to me is true. Maybe it's not the good words, but the true teachings, let's say, of different traditions who really, which are, Thich Nhat Hanh told about living Buddha, living Christ. So they are not like dead traditions, but living insights. Actually, they help you to understand deeper your own tradition.
Mm,
If you're able to connect with the
yep.
best of every traditions, it will help you to understand, to go deeper into your own tradition. Probably, as you were saying about Thich Nhat Hanh, talking about Christianity and living Christ, maybe, living Buddhism can be a support for living Christianism, and the same way around, right?
Yeah, and he expresses how he loved fruit salad. You know, the mixture of things and to learn and taste different practices and understandings. So I love that about
Yeah,
him.
there is no reason to limit ourselves to one book. Let's say, it just doesn't make sense. If we see spirituality as a kind of science of the inner world, if we think that religious is a dogma, then you're focusing on one book. If you think actually it's a science of something that is existing, that is in each of us, then you may want to study that through different lens that could be enriching.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Do you believe humanity's core crisis is spiritual at its root? If so, how did you come to that understanding?
Yeah, I believe so. I believe that we have to redefine why we are here on earth from a spiritual understanding. So we are, I think, soul in evolution, and we come to the earth to make some experience and being able to, you know, more closely express our true nature as souls, we could say. And yeah, and that's, the reason why I think if we have that understanding, then it makes total sense to organize societies for being. That's what we are here from. And society should help us rather than deter or be an hindrance to our spiritual journey. If we bring that spiritual understanding to something a little bit more down to the earth, let's say, we could talk about the need for cultural evolution. And at the moment, I think that story of separation that characterize modernity in terms of, seeing ourselves as individualistic,
Mm,
selfish human beings that wants only to pursue their own interests. I think that story, which comes from especially the economics science, is really at that understanding of human being and what it is to flourish. I think that is a real problem that we have. It also set us separate from nature. It sees the reality, the universe, as a dead object, while I do think consciousness in the universe. And I think our journey, obviously, especially when you're on spiritual path, you recognize that there is no coincidence. We are living in a world that is alive, that is responding to our intention, that is responding to why we have come on this earth, that is responding even to some karma that we have brought from past lives, in my experience. So yeah, this is a whole story that needs to change towards the story of interbeing, and there is a spiritual dimension to it. I can compare that to the axial age, like the historians of religions talk about that time of history, which was around, let's say, the fifth century before Christ, where in many parts of the world there are prophets that have come, very wise people that have set up new philosophies for all these cultures that we are living on, whether it is, Confucius, Lao Tzu in Asia, Socrates in Europe, the Buddha, etc. So they have, set up the philosophical foundations for our cultures, and I think we are exactly at the same stage where, through a kind of spiritual crisis and spiritual evolution, we have to redefine this very philosophical foundation on which our cultures and societies are based upon.
As I look and I observe a lot, and I look at our society and on the news in America, I believe we live in a system that's creating addiction, creating mental health issues, and it's also probably creating disease and illness with the stress level people are living in, the hate, the anger, chasing. People are living paycheck to paycheck, most people, and they're on survival mode mentality and the us against them mentality. Do you believe that can be a core problem that's creating addiction, mental health, and disease?
Yeah, and I think it relates to what I call, development paradigm, the fact that we have been so much prioritizing economic production in a capitalist society.
Hmm.
And this system does not really answer well our human needs. It's rather trying to manipulate them for their own profits, and they leave us as human beings, in a very degraded, I would say, state of mental and even spiritual health. So yeah, it creates a lot of stress, a lot of that story of, that we are selfish, competitive being is undermining the social fabric, is undermining the trust we have in each other. And yeah, this idea of separation is also creating, a lot of even our governance systems, we can call it adversarial democracy, competitive democracy. It's about one group fighting each other for their own interests. Basically, that's how it has been seen. And this is necessarily somehow leading to polarization and very deep conflicts among societies. So we need to, what we see is a result of these political institutions. And actually, I was mentioning, that ideal governance system that the Baha'i faith is implementing. I think that's actually a solution to the state of crisis in which is our democracy.
Yeah, thank you. You hear Kennedy talk about making America healthy again, but what I've learned, like in the 12-step community, if you don't, we have to act our way into better thinking. You can't depend on one person to do it and change the water in cereal. But if we're not learning how to respect and love one another, have understanding, and watch how we speak towards one another, I think we defeat the whole purpose. If we're going to continue to dehumanize people, pointing the finger, being a victim, or caught up in collective egos like different political parties blaming this person and blaming that person and putting each other down. It's impossible to make America healthy again if we continue to stay stuck in that consciousness. As Albert Einstein says, you can't solve your problems in that same level of consciousness that continues to create the problem. Same thing like Marianne Williamson. She says a lack of love is the level of the problem, and a lack of love is the level of the solution. We have to go back to love.
Exactly, exactly. I think we need we can't there are some civic virtues of nonviolent communication, of dialogue, of deep listening that we need to cultivate. Since social media has been undermining a lot of that, but we can't think it's like with the economic system. If there is no trust, and we are going a bit that road, in the economic system, like it's like the last almost age of capitalism, of where it's all about extraction, etc. But if you and through that the system will end up destroying itself. I think that's what we are seeing now with Trump. You want instead of thinking about sharing more the resources among people, that there's a lot of billionaires in that around that government. Instead of sharing that, it's easier to say no, actually it's because other countries are taking advantage of us. So you're putting the fingers outside in order to avoid that discussion, and then you want to extract so much from them that you actually disrupt the whole economic system that actually was working relatively well for your own country. And I think the same is in politics, that there are some civic virtues that are an inherent part of democracy. And if you don't respect, then the whole political system is becoming non-functional. So we need to relearn all of that. We need to build a transpartisan platform. We all have, images on these people from the other side, but actually we need to really listen who are these people, what they think, and we are often surprised that it's not exactly as we are being told, and there are much more bridges that can be constructed that we are told to think.
I love that. Thank you. We look at many of the political leaders, like in America, I look at and I see, including Trump. You brought up Trump, and I see reactive behaviors, blame, lack of emotional maturity. I believe to be in politics, even becoming president, you should be doing some form of inner work and heal from your traumas. Because when I see Trump, I see a scared, and I'm not talking about politics, just as a human being. I see a little boy that's traumatized, still trying to prove to his dad that he's worthy, because he's addicted to power and money and attention. And we have leaders like that. Maybe that's, I don't know. I just see wounded little children as leaders on both sides of the political parties, blaming each other, putting each other down. I'm like, wow, is this really healthy to have leaders like this putting each other down and being immature children? Um, what's your definition on conscious leadership?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that. I think that's a very important topic. I mean, look at Putin or Xi Jinping stories. They are also made incredible traumas that are, that they have faced in their childhood. So it's definitely an important aspect. And uh, what some study shows also is that they actually resonate with some people that have faced the same trauma linked
Yes.
to patriarchy, etc. Because when you are a child and you're getting beaten, let's say, for example, by your father, uh, then you can't think that your father does not know what he's doing. So you tend to think that there should be a real reason why he's beating you, and you tend then to turn to these kind of authoritarian figures. And there have been studies that shows that. So it's a very complex problem. Now, on your question on what I call conscious leadership, I mean, I've worked on that concept of spiritual intelligence and what are these kind of spiritual qualities that we can develop through many different types of practices. But I think the essence of it, to me, to a great leaders, is that the capacity to be guided for the better. Some maybe have capacities to be guided for the worst. But I think, when you develop that spiritual connection starting to yourself, you can really resonate uh, with what we call the soul of your nations or the soul of your organizations, if you're a CEO, for example. So it's what Gandhi was saying. He was saying he was not the leader of the Indian independentist movement. He said the leader was a small, calm inner voice. That's the capacity to, be able to connect. Be, of course, that takes off being of service and being of service to the light, the spirit. And when you develop that, and then you need to lower very much your ego, then you can become, you can being guided and connect to the soul of the people or the group of people you are serving. So that would be, to me, a very important aspect of that conscious leadership. And it has to do also of how you can activate what is best in the human beings. So, somehow I would say Trump has a bit of a genius to connect with the worst of the people. Somehow he has that insight of, there is this, anger, or there is this hate that is not being able to express itself, but I know it is there and I can tap on it and allow to express it. Well, actually, I think the conscious leaders are the one that is able to be able to see, recognize, and bring up that capacity for, all the highest human value, for love, for understanding, for peace, etc.
Do you think these leaders are a reflection of our society?
Yeah, definitely they are a reflection, I would say, of our collective consciousness. And they are part of our evolution. I think we need to embrace
Yes.
that process. They are helping us bring some of the darkness that I understand we need to heal to move forward in our own evolution. So evolution is a dialectic process. The good and the bad comes together, and I think that's what we are seeing now. And in a disease, in Chinese or traditional medicine or Ayurveda, usually they recognize, and when the disease comes up, it's already one path forward into the healing. The causes of the disease were already there, and when the disease come up, it's an opportunity to heal the roots of the disease. So I think
Mm.
that's really the same. I think all these leaders are helping us to see our civilizational crisis actually as a cultural and a spiritual crisis. And I think somehow, they are helping us collectively to recognize we need to work at that level to heal our societies and being able to, create a different type of civilizations and world to live in.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. How does inner transformation, things like meditation, emotional healing, mindfulness, or presence relate to a systematic political change? Given that collective and generational trauma still affects us today, can we truly shift the outer world without doing inner work?
Yeah, no, actually, I think somehow we really need to integrate that inner dimension into our efforts for social change. And as you mentioned, an important aspect of that is about witnessing, collective witnessing of our collective wants. And I think we're seeing a lot of that. We had with, for example, the Black Lives Matters movement or the Me Too movement. We are seeing more the collective consciousness, you know, getting some focus for healing on this on these past ones. And I think you can, we see more and more people recognizing the importance of that inner dimension of change. And I go even one step forward with the politics of being, that the inner dimension is not only a mean for an end, but it actually the real human progress.
Mm,
So I think, and that helps, it's kind of creating that kind of, we can call it an attractor, a vision that
I
is
love it.
pulling us into that direction, and that makes all the other ideas that are on this way more relevant. So it's a deep vision that I think can help us recognize the need for this inner work, but even, going beyond that to say that actually, this human life, this human development, or even, well-being actually is very much tied to that inner work.
Mm. What kind of words of wisdom would you give someone that's deeply seated in their political parties and they're constantly blaming the next party um, for the problem we're facing in society today?
Um, yeah, I would say first, to just to become, mindful of their own attitude as you're describing. And we are all part of societies. Societies is not, or the world is not something out there. We are creating the world, especially around us, and how we are, led to perceive it. So if you start acknowledging what's going on in yourself, these emotions of anger and judgment, and putting the fingers on others without looking for oneself is not a solution. And I think from there, you have to, try to enter in dialogue with other people who see the world differently. We know that social media and the algorithms, they are all giving us the content that we are led to believe. No, so we kind of all live in our bubbles. So just acknowledging that, invite people to step out of their bubbles, just get to more transpartisan discussions, even with people around them, or through, now there are more and more groups that are set up for that, so that they can see, a different view, and especially, not being stuck in the image of other people, that their own media project, but really being able to meet people. Even myself, I had some experience of, just when I'm able to make the space to meet people that I would tend to think may not resonate, for example, understand my ideas, I'm actually have been surprised to see that actually we could share quite a lot, and they were, much more open and wise that I would think so. So I think it's something we need to be reminded every day, and yeah, these experiences can help us to, not be trapped in that bubble.
Yeah, I love that because like you'll see people here in America that have stickers on their cars that says F Brandon, which basically says F Biden, right? And then you'll have other people wearing FDT, F Donald Trump. And that's not making America healthy with that same attitude. It's continuing to
Yeah.
create separation and division. And it's going to take more than one person to try to make America healthy again. It takes all of us, like you were saying, and I love that.
Hmm.
And I was telling someone the other day, well, okay, and they're a Republican. I go, well, why don't you find a friend or a family member that's Democrat and look at their algorithm and seeing what they're being fed, and then compare yours with theirs, and just have a healthy dialogue with them. Because we live in a society, if you don't think like me or act like me, you're against me, like you're the enemy.
Hmm.
And I was telling Neil
Hmm.
Donald Walsh, the problem with love thy neighbor as thyself is most people don't love themselves anymore.
Hmm.
So I appreciate what you
Indeed.
said.
Yeah.
And I apologize because I usually I should have your book and I want to read your book and I'm excited to read your book. And I would love to have you back on once I read your book. But from what
Sure.
I understand about your work in the politics of being, you speak of a society rooted in inner well-being, love, and harmony with the earth, not just as a concept, but as something that can be lived. What does that mean in practice, and how do we manifest that into existence?
Yeah, that's a big question, but yeah,
Sorry.
to say that actually there's no, but there is a even a good science now showing us that our own well-being is actually very much not so much linked to our economic or social status, and we can see that every day. People very billionaires that will commit suicide. So but rather linked to our own connection to ourselves. As you said, most of us don't love ourselves, right? And that's the and wisdom traditions have always said about well-being comes from the way you cultivate a good perception of your life, and live it with gratitude, rather than with cultivating so many needs and expectations and being sad when they are not materializing. So it's all about our visions of life, and it's science tells us it's all about our relationships, friends and families. That's the main source of happiness and well-being. And we have seen also a lot of scientific evidence of the benefits of being in nature for our own health and well-being. So actually, I think this triple connection to self, others, and nature can be the source of our well-being. And it's important to have a more inner, so of our well-being to be fine in ourselves. Otherwise, we are looking in endless consumption that is destroying the earth without making us really better. Uh, and how does that look like? Well, the politics of being is really about redefining, redesigning, I would say, our societies. We are becoming aware also that our institutions are linked with, our own mindsets, worldviews, etc. And we can choose the one that are more favorable to our well-being, and from there we can decide to educate our children for being more, to fulfill their calling, to connect to their inner voice and fulfill their callings of what they want to offer to the world. We can address the big mental health crises that we are facing, which actually is linked to many, or the main burden of disease are linked to stress and lifestyles are linked to our mental health. So it's a big leverage point for public health to address that dimension of mental health.
Mhm.
Or governance systems I've mentioned, or justice systems, can we be much more compassionate and see that people are conditioned to do what they do, and have use more a restorative justice system, which actually is a good example of what it means politics of being. Like when we do something, at the same time it should cultivate whatever we do in lives, in these different areas of lives. At the same time it should cultivate human qualities. And restorative justice is about bringing people together, the offenders and the victims and people from the community, for a serious dialogue where we cultivate human qualities such as presence, listening, responsibility, in some cases, forgiveness. So it's a good example that we can be more effective in our justice systems while cultivating human qualities, instead of feeding our instinct for retaliation, which is what we are seeing now in, for example, the American justice systems, which has so many people in jail. And as someone say, jail is a very expensive solution for making things worse, right? Right. So
And making
yeah,
money.
just to give some examples of, yeah, and of course making money, that's very linked to that economy. Yeah.
And I love what Thich Nhat Hanh always says: the further we move away from Mother Nature, the sicker we become. And I love
Yeah,
that.
definitely.
You
Yeah.
you draw a lot of inspiration from like ancient and indigenous wisdom traditions, which offers pathways to more heart-centered and spiritually aligned way of living. In this time of our global like crisis or uncertainty, what gives you hope that humanity is ready for a shift? And if you could share a core principle from your book, Politics of Being, with the world leaders or citizens alike, what would it be? Like, what would be your core principle?
Yeah, so I think the first stage is to recognize that we can't deal with the problems of the world that we are facing without a cultural or spiritual evolution.
Mm.
So I think, and then come the question, are we able to do it? Right? So, and are we able to do it? In my book, I bring very concrete agendas based almost exclusively on existing examples. So it's only the thing is only to being able to put them together into a new vision as part of a new vision for societies with a coherent narrative. So if we are already implementing it, if countries, governments, etc., are already implementing different pieces of that, that means it's possible. And if you see what are the solutions, there is no doubt that if we are bringing them together in one generation, we make a quantum leap in terms of consciousness. But these are very grounded, public policies, etc. But there is no doubt that if you're bringing them together into that politics of being vision, we will make a giant step in human evolution. So yes, it's very possible. We know, I think, I believe, the book gives a very clear vision about how to do it and what it looks like in practice. Well, we have mentioned a little bit in some different sectors, but I think what it felt like, and I go back to the first stage, is that we need first to acknowledge there is no way forward until we stop and start looking inside.
Mm.
So I think that's really the first step. And if we go that way and we are starting to acknowledge that actually all the what we see in the outer world is a reflection of this consciousness, of these values, of this worldview, this way of understanding the world, then we'll be ready to evolve those so that we can produce better outcomes in reality. So I think there will be, because you were somehow asking for maybe how it feels. I think how it would feel would be that, you know, really stopping an acknowledgement of, I think, all the suffering that is inside and have been with humanity for a very long time. And you've mentioned, collective historical traumas, I think, is a big part of that healing that needs to happen for us to be able to move to the next stage. And in my experience, and that's, I think, a very important truth of Buddhism, like the acknowledgement of suffering is really the the doorway to the spiritual path. And I think a lot of uh, you know many people are just not want to look inside and open up and acknowledge that suffering inside. And I think that's really what we need to do as humanity, and find a way for our different communities to heal and reconcile so that we can move forward together, right?
I love that. Thank you. You met the Dalai Lama before, right?
Yes, that was a year and a half ago, I think.
I love that. I love how the like Buddhist leaders like the Dalai Lama or Thich Nhat Hanh, they'll like acknowledge Jesus, and that you see them bowing to him and giving honoring him. I wish the Christian leaders would do the same, because in Thich Nhat Hanh said something, and I'm paraphrasing him. He says if we can't have world peace unless we have peace amongst the religions, and I
Mhm.
think instead of looking at everything different and saying they're false prophets or whatever, we should look at it. There's the similarities and look at the principles and the beauty within all religions to create more peace amongst each other and coexistence. Yeah, I love that. The Dalai Lama said something pretty profound, and he said if every eight-year old was taught meditation, we would eliminate violence in the world within one generation. No, and that's beautiful, and I think personally, I believe there should be a class in school where we're taught how to like apply principles and have coping skills to deal with life, because I didn't have that growing up, and I know a lot of my friends didn't have that growing up, and a lot of us came from trauma and not knowing how to deal with it, not knowing how to have communication, or Thich Nhat Hanh would say mindful uh, communication, mindful listening. I didn't know how to apply any of that stuff, and it created a lot of suffering within myself. So I think that's very important. When I understand the suffering within myself, I can understand the suffering of others. And one thing I learned by Thich Nhat Hanh, he says, when you learn how to suffer, you suffer much less. And I've learned how to suffer through applying these principles that's found in all religions and 12-step communities and so on. It's so vital for the human being to learn how to apply spiritual principles for inner peace, as within, so without, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, also you know the evolution of education right now with the internet, with artificial intelligence. Education will be less and less about knowledge, and it will be more and more about these human capacities. And the knowledge also is evolving so fast, so it's more about how you can be critical and analyze that knowledge, which is especially looking at how your mind works. And so I think all of these human capacities should be the basis of an education for the whole life. And we see them, developing with, the positive education,
Mm.
social, emotional learning. These things are, more and more developing in many education systems.
I love that. Thank you. You brought up earlier karma and past lives. What's the whole purpose for you? What's your understanding on the purpose of reincarnation?
Reincarnation, I would say it's about, yeah, growing as human being, being able to fully embody or divine spiritual nature. So we learn to do that through different lives. And the karma works in a way that will allow you to learn. Uh, I think there are two ways. Maybe there's sometimes you'll get, we say sometimes, the consequences of your past acts. So if you have done something wrong to someone in a past life, that will happen to you in that life, right?
Mm.
And that can sound sometimes a bit as punishment. So I learned through punishment. But the same way, if you have been, I don't know, if someone has cut your head, or someone, let's say, has killed you, not allowing you to breathe, maybe in the next life you will have some breathing problems. So this was not your fault, and it's not a punishment, but it's just an experience that you need to integrate and transcend. So karma in these two aspects are really just for you to being able to learn from lives to lives about your experiences.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I don't mean to sound repetitive, but in a world that's been constantly fed fear, division, I feel like your message needs to be heard again and again. The Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh was once asked, "What do we need to do to save our world?" And he said, "What we most need is to hear within us the sound of the earth crying." What does that mean to you? And do you see global warming not just as an ecological crisis, but as a symptom of a deeper spiritual disconnection? How might politics of being help restore the sacred relationship with Mother Earth?
Yeah, thank you very much for this question. Yeah, and Thich Nhat Hanh said also, is to fall in love with Mother Earth, basically connect, in one way to our suffering or through love. And yeah, I feel we are so disconnected from Mother Earth. And to me, I mean, I could really relate, and even since I would say a child, when you go, let's say, through a urban infrastructure, driving by car, and you see the whole field being destroyed, etc., you can feel really that suffering of the earth, or in a mine or something. You can really, and it's not beautiful, uh, while nature is really a source of beauty, and it's not harmonious, it's not healthy. And I think if you can connect to that, and for me, really, as I said, my spiritual journey, which took more shape in Mexico when I was 23, and I was really based on that reconnection for mothers. And I think through that reconnection, I would say, to Mother Earth, it was a way to reconnect with myself and to heal myself. So I think, that environmental crisis, the climate crisis, is also an opportunity to become aware of how much we have been disconnected from the earth and from ourselves, and how much this is unhealthy, and this is a symptom of a deep spiritual crisis that affect actually our own well-being very much. And I think the new paradigm that I've put forward in politics of being in relation to nature, I think, is the rights of nature that we're seeing developing in many countries. And these are based on the understanding that nature is not an object. Nature is a living being. There is a universal declaration of the rights of Mother Earth, which say that the Earth actually is a living being. And we need to reconnect with that inside of, Mother Earth, of Gaia, that you find in all indigenous traditions, I would say. And this is, and we are part of it, and we can connect to Mother Earth as a living being. We can have a proper relationship to that being, and we can feel the love of that being who is nourishing us, sustaining us, and supporting us in that journey of humanity. So I think that would be how a politics of being would approach our relationship with Mother Earth. Nature rights, I think, are a great way, because they are also asking us a very important question. When if you want to, let's say, build a dam or something, that will ask us, is it so needed for our well-being or for our human rights? Let's say, do we really need that so much that we need to destroy that ecosystem to make it happen? So it's, bringing that question that, is it really worth it? And is it really worth the destruction for other living beings? And I think that's a very important question that we should ask ourselves.
I love that. Thank you. I'm going to end it with the Thich Nhat Hanh quote. When you wake up and you see that the earth is not just the environment, the earth is us, you touch the nature of inner being. And at that moment, you can have a real communication with the earth. We have to wake up together. And if we wake up together, we have a chance. Our way of living, our life, and planning our future has led us into this situation. And now we need to look deeply to find a way, not only as individuals, but as a collective, as a species. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much, Rubo. It was a great exchange. I love the fact that also you were so inspired by Thich Nhat Hanh, and I'm very happy to make space for him in that discussion.
I'm also inspired by you, and I look forward to getting your book, and I'm going to read it, and I hope I can bring you back and talk more about your book.
Sure, I'm looking forward to that, Rubo. Thank you.
Thank you. Namastizzle.
Namaste.
Just know we out here. Know we out here working in a major way. Had to speak on it just to make a play. Any given subject, know we make a way. Time to level up on a day-to-day. Know we out here working for the greater good. Expand your mind, broaden your lens the way you should. From the stars to the galaxy to speak on spirituality. Higher understanding for the neighborhood.